You not?
I'm not joined in the audio.
Too late now.
Well, yeah, you're not, but you don't have to mute.
Well, it's just because I haven't joined the audio.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to join.
I just want to welcome everyone to today's meeting for the Medical Cannabis Policy Advisory Board. This afternoon on January 28th. This meeting is being held virtually. It is hosted by the Utah Department of Health and Human Services, Center for Medical Cannabis based in Salt Lake City, Utah. Public notice of this meeting was provided as required in Utah's open meeting law and was posted on the Utah Public Notice website. In compliance with Utah Open Meetings Law, this meeting is being recorded. A recording of this meeting will be posted to the Utah Public Notice website no later than 3 business days following the date of this meeting. A rough draft copy of the unapproved written minutes will be posted to the Public Notice website within 30 days of this meeting. Approved minutes will be posted to the Utah Public Notice website no later than 3 business days after board approval. You do have everyone attending both in person and virtually. And then every proposed agenda item must have a 1-page summary of the topic submitted to mcpab@utah.gov no later than 7 days prior to the board meeting. Board members will present the 1-page summary during board meetings, and board members will discuss the summary. If no written summary is provided to board staff, the relevant agenda item will be removed from the agenda. Only items that have been submitted in writing in advance of board meetings will be allowed during discussion by the board chair, including presentations from the public. Board members will then request additional presentation memorandums on the agenda item from relevant bodies to be presented at the next board meeting. Those presentations and memos will also need to be submitted to MCPAB@utah.gov 7 days prior to the board meeting. For public comments will be limited to 2 minutes per person. If you want more time, you must request it from the chair. The chair may accept or reject requests for additional time. A public comment period is not guaranteed every meeting. The chair has the authority to create and remove public comment period from the agenda or during the meeting. You can look over public comment guidelines that are posted on the Utah Public Notice website. Please state your name and your affiliation when making a public comment so it can be reflected in the meeting minutes. Only comments made on items listed on the agenda will be considered. If you have a comment about an item not listed on the agenda, please email them to mcpab@utah.gov. If you're attending via Zoom, the Zoom public chat will be disabled during the Zoom meeting. When the chair indicates it is time for public comments, you will use the raise hand icon on Zoom to indicate that you would like to make a comment. When you are called on, you would be taken off mute. Take 2 minutes to make your comment. Please sign in on the public comment sign-in sheet with your name and indicate what agenda item you would like to comment on. The chair will indicate when it is time for public comment. The board chair will call on you when it is your turn, and you will, as a reminder, if you are in person, please do not speak when others are presenting. Our microphone is quite sensitive, and those attending over Zoom cannot hear when others are speaking at the same time. Side conversations and comments from the public during this board meeting are prohibited. Please use a voice that is louder than your typical one when speaking, commenting, or presenting. When you speak, please lean towards the table as if there were a microphone. For additional information, to make a suggestion for agenda items, or to contact board members or staff, send an email to mcpab@utah.gov. And with that, we will get started. I'll welcome everyone here. Fantastic cold days in Utah will return. We'll move right into the next item for approval of the December 2024 minutes. Does anyone have a chance to read over the minutes that was sent to committee? Okay, does anyone have any changes or that you want to make? If not, we'll approve. First and second, we'll just do a voice vote. All in favor? Aye.
That's the same.
Yeah. And Ken,
was me.
you're able to hear us pretty good?
Yep, that was me voting yes.
Okay. Okay, was the second. Okay, sorry. All right, we'll move right on to the administrative business, which at this time I don't have anything pressing as far as a board. Just so for an update, the legislative session is in full swing. Today's, most of the agenda items are gonna be discussing several bills. And there's more bills being added and all the time.
We've got a video right now. Just get it back.
And so as it goes on, there may be more things. Discussion today, stuff that's gonna be presented next couple of days. And so we have a lot to get through today, so we'll try to kind of keep it concise and get through it all. But we'll move right into item number 4 and turn some time over to Mr. Oborn.
Great. Thanks for the chance to just share a few updates from the Department of Health and Human Services. As of today, there are 94,538 active medical cannabis. Obviously, we have a meeting earlier, but that's as of today, so pretty much the end of the month. We're about 94,500. And then at the end of December, we had, at that time we had November, so it's an increase of 7 there. And then we had, we counted 79 pharmacy medical providers at the end of December, and that's an increase of 4 since November. And then I thought it'd be good to just share a few 2024 year-end statistics. So at the end of 2024, we had 92,649 active medical cannabis patient cards. And that is a 19.5% increase since December 2023. So that's how much we increased during that year in active medical cannabis cards. And just comparing that, that increase, when we compare 2023 or 2022 to 2023, there was a 24.8 increase. So percent increase. And so we went from a 24.8 increase to a 19.5% increase. If you're comparing numbers of active medical cannabis cards in different years and the number of at the end of the year that we have. Also in 2024, there were 33,805 first-time medical cannabis patient card holders who joined the program for the first time who had not been a part of it previously. And that's about 200 less than the number that joined in 2023 of new card holders that had not joined in the past. And then in 2024, we had 930 non-resident cards issued and about 200 caregiver cards issued. And there were 97 new qualified medical providers who joined the program. And just to get an idea for the contact to our customer service staff throughout 2024, our staff took about 12,000 phone calls, which that's about 898 hours of incoming calls. That's how much they received during the course of the year. And one thing that we track as a measure of our success is how many of those calls were answered in the moment. And we know that people call us after hours, they call us on holidays, they call us over weekends. So keep that in mind. But we have 57% of phone calls we're able to answer those in the moment that someone is calling for assistance with applying for a card or whatever they're calling about. And we have a target of 60% is where we're trying to get. And we haven't been there in the past and we'd like to get there. So we hope to report at the end of this year that we've reached 60% or better. And then as far as our audits go, as you know, we have an auditing team and they're doing audits of the qualified medical providers and different parts of our software. And this past year, they have calculated audit passing rate of 94.9%. So that's how many of the audit people are passing, which is a good sign. That's improved over time as we have done more audits, more people are paying attention, making sure they're in compliance, which is great to see. So those are some updates as far as stats go. We were able to participate in the University of Utah Center for Medical Cannabis Research Symposium that took place last week. And in fact, there was a study that shared some results from patient responses to a survey that was highlighted during the meeting. And that particular project, they were sharing preliminary results. The rest of the results will be available at the end of March 2025. So we're excited. The U has been able to do that project and we'll get the results by the end of March. Also, earlier this month, we held our second cannabis medical provider quarterly meeting. That was on January 9th. And as you may know, all medical providers that have that are registered as qualified medical providers are invited to join that, and also pharmacists are invited to join that, and also the QNP proxies that work in the medical clinics are also invited to join that. And so we had a group of about 35 or 40 that joined that virtually, and we were able to focus on educating them about the new targeted marketing law that's in place and some new rules that apply to them. And then we also talked about limited medical provider certifications and how those are entered at the pharmacies. We did a refresher about how those are done. And then we also accepted an invitation to present at the Ogden Medical Surgical Society meeting coming up in May. It's on May 15th. Dr. Matt McKiff, who we contracted with to help us do presentations, he'll present the first hour and I'll present the second hour. And that'll be a good opportunity that we'll have in May to share more with regular providers about the program. Are there any questions about anything I shared? Great, that's all from DHHS.
One question actually I did have, now that I thought of it, goes back to my days being in call centers, but when you say you answer at the same time, is that not on hold? That's just they're picking it up and there's a live person right then?
Right.
You don't have a hold music or?
There is hold music, right?
Okay.
Yeah, but these are people, when they call in, we answer when they're actually calling. That happens 57% of the time. Yeah.
Do you guys track what percent, like, do you call people back after on weekends and holidays? Do you read?
Oh, yeah, because they leave a voicemail and we always call them back.
And how many attempts are you doing? Just one? Is it just?
If
I'm
we
wondering
leave a
what the success
voicemail,
rate.
we just say, hey, this is
back.
Center for Medical Cannabis, call us back at this number,
Okay.
right? And then, there's an enormous number of people that don't call us, they email us, right? And we always respond within 2 days. That's our response. And actually, usually, I'd say most often it's same day.
Yeah.
We're able to get back and answer questions that they have. And we're using Salesforce to help us track those statistics of people. We're also able to track the topics that are coming up in the emails and the phone calls as well in Salesforce. And as we get that data, I'm happy to share that with you as well in the future.
All right, let's turn some time to Mr. Cody James.
Good, thank you. Just a handful of things. I think on February 5th, we have our establishment licensing board meeting. Handful of change requests and a couple more renewals, some pharmacy and some processors, both renewing that day. As far as rules go, our compliance procedures rule, R66-16, I believe, went into effect on January 23rd. Those are in effect. The one that's still outstanding is the closed door pharmacy rule. That's on schedule to be in effect on February 21st. And then hopefully soon after that, should start to see those applications out there for pharmacies that want to put in for that aspect of it.
Does the department plan to license all three at the same time?
Haven't really got to that point yet, because I keep having to go to legislative meetings, so. I haven't thought about it, but maybe after the middle of this session, when we know things are going.
February what?
February 21st, when the rules should be in effect, so right around that. Then, if we can get everything, if everything goes as planned, and we all know how well plans work out. Is I'd like to have stuff kind of out there and starting to go about the 1st of March. And kind of be month to month for the next 30 days open application. 30 days reviewing applications, 30 days to kind of stuff like that, so. But again, that's the, my hope, I'll just put that, not my plans, my hope, so. Not sure it's gonna do. Last thing to talk about or to give you guys an update on is the inventory control system ICS. Willing to let anybody take a guess on what they told me today to say.
Nothing.
No, they told me.
Or
to-
TBD.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what they said. What I was sent was to tell y'all. That they've encountered some additional issues with data conversion, so we will need to extend the go live date again. Current projections are in late March or early April, but we are conscious of the issues that could arise if we were to launch right before 420. If it looks like it will be within 3, or if it looks like. It looks like it will be within 3 weeks of 420, we are going to target a date after that. So an official date has not been set, so. Yeah. I feel the same. That, I don't think I have anything else. If you guys have any questions.
Nope, but I wrote it down that what you told us, and go live. Okay, all right, thank you, Cody, and we'll go ahead and just move on, and we do have a presentation on purchasing trends by Mr. Oldmore. Turn time over to him.
Okay, I'll wait for the presentation to get up there and then we'll start. Okay, well, welcome for those joining online who may not be familiar with me. I'm Rich Oborn. I'm Director for the Center for Medical Cannabis at the Utah Department of Health and Human Services, and the Medical Cannabis Policy Advisory Board had asked us and our staff to collect some data regarding purchasing trends and some breakdowns between older patients and younger patients that we've found. And so our team at DHHS was able to take a look at the data, and we were able to share this thanks to their efforts. So let's go ahead to the first slide there. What this shows is just a comparison of the total program, the number of patients that are under 65 and those that are over 65. And so that's changed just a little bit since the beginning of the program. We began in 2020 with about 15% of those over 65 of all card holders being over 65. And then that has just gradually decreased. And so in 2024, of all those who held cards, 12% were over 65. Next slide. This just shows how the number of individuals under 65, how that has increased in the blue, and then there's been an increase in the over 65 as well, but just not as dramatic in the number of total active card holders that get registered by our office. So there's a question of how many active patients younger than 65 and 65 and older never made a single purchase from a pharmacy in 2024. So we were able to find that of those who were younger than 65, 16.8%, and then over 65, 24.7%. So that's about an 8% difference that we find there. So it appears that if you're over 65, that you're just 8% more of the time compared to the younger group. Are you never making a single purchase from a medical cannabis pharmacy.
Rich, can I ask a question? Could that be reflective of a caregiver making a purchase for the individual, or is that tied to the card number, or you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's about 200 caregiver cards total, so it's a low number. And I believe that this does take into account, anyone who has someone go and buy for them.
Okay,
That counts as a purchase for
Okay.
them.
perfect, thank you.
Okay. And then another question that we sought to answer was just how many active patients younger than 65 and 65 and older renewed their medical cannabis patient card and never made a purchase from a medical cannabis pharmacy. So they took another step in the program by actually renewing the card at least once, rather than just, possible there's a lot of people that never renew at all, but these are people that took the step to renew at least once, were active, but still never made a purchase. So of those in the younger than 65 group, we're at 9.7%. And then with the older than 65 and older, we're at 14.3%, so about 5% more when you compare the two for the patients that were 65 and older, never made a purchase. Okay, and then next slide is how many active patients younger than 65 years and 65 and older have purchased only once from a pharmacy in 2024. This has 40.1% patients younger than 65 have only made one purchase, and then 53% have only made one purchase. That's a 13% increase when you compare the two. Okay. And then this graph shows the percent of patients with active cards that have made a purchase each year. And so you can see that year by year comparison between the 65 and older and the under 65 being in the aqua color there, and then the yellow being the 65 and older. So slightly less percentage over time. In 2021, there was a difference of about 4% there. And then you see a slight increase to that difference in 2022, a 7% difference between the two, and then a 9% difference in 2023, and then 8% about in 2024. That shows there. And then the last graph we have here, or second to last, percent of patients with active cards that made a purchase each quarter. So this shows that difference between the over 65 and under 65 for purchasing once each quarter. Okay, and then our last graph is the percent of patients with active cards that made a purchase each month, and that shows the difference there between the two groups, obviously, and then it's remained about steady throughout, but as you can see that between the 55% and the 40%, it's about a 15% difference between the over 65 and under 65. And the percentage of those who are making a purchase each month. And I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has those about the data.
Rich, is there anything that the department's planning to do as far as educating patients on? Now that they have a patient, now that they have a card, like, I know you have a video out there that says how to talk to your pharmacist. Is there like an educational email blast that you could send? Because many people may not understand how to go use that card, what to do with it now that they have it. I'm looking at these, and you have 20,000 people from 2024 that got a card and never made a payment. And then you have another 50,000 on top of that bought once. So that's 70,000 patients
Mhm.
this last year. When you said we ended with 2024 with 92,649. So, I mean, it seems like a sizable number. What plans do you have for 2025 to help kind of educate patients better?
Yeah, well, one thing that we do is we allow patients to sign up for a newsletter. And that's their choice. If we give that option to all patients when they apply for a card, we give them and when they renew as well. They're given the option to sign up for a newsletter. And by consenting to that newsletter, we educate them, give them general information about the program, and so they're reminded about the medical cannabis program. We're careful about how we use the patient email addresses. Obviously, we don't want to be sending them, a lot of emails. But one thing that we do plan on doing in 2025 is putting together some very simple messages about responsible use and about other topics that we know that are important for patients to be reminded about or educated about. And we'll be sharing those with all medical cannabis card holders in the program.
What
And
are
so-
some of those topics?
What's that?
What are some of those other topics that you plan to message to patients around?
So I think it's some of the basics like safe storage. I think you'd agree that's one thing I know that pharmacies emphasize, especially with gummies, because they can be mistaken for candy at times. So that would be one message that we would share. Another message I think is important to share is just how to understand the information that might be on the label, or a certificate of analysis. That's something that came up in a recent meeting, where there was that was just an idea that came up in it, is to provide some resources that help patients learn more about how to interpret a certificate of analysis, especially with some of the legislation that may pass. That might be a specific topic, because of if the legislation passes, there'll be, I think, a lot more patients asking questions and accessing their certificates of analysis. So those are a few examples of some of the resources that and messages that we hope to create in 2025.
What about messaging around like access points and that home delivery is available? Because I hear you saying, yes, of course, we want to make sure people are aware of, some of the do's and don'ts when it comes to cannabis, but what about generally informing the public of where they can obtain access to medical cannabis, that home delivery is an available, way to purchase? Because to me, it doesn't seem like those things in any way, shape, or form is the department taking a position on the efficacy or not of cannabis. So why not that? Why not spreading the word on access and where people can gain access to medical cannabis? Why does it seem like a lot of the educational topics are, the potential ills and harms of cannabis? I'm not saying you don't present those, because if the science is there, the science is there. But why not present more information on where people can gain access to this medicine, home delivery, the types of form factors that are allowed in Utah, and things like that? Why isn't that seem to be the education that's provided to patients, and honestly to QMPs as well?
Yeah, I think that's something to consider. We can consider that along with any other ideas that the board has about messages that you feel would be helpful, especially, as a card holder, Nanette.
Yeah.
And Des, you as a patient advocate, if you have suggestions for what should be the focuses, and any board member, actually, of course, we would want to hear from, or members of the public that are joining online, if you do have ideas about messages that you feel are missing, you're welcome to share those, and we can consider those as we make our plans. But we definitely do plan on making it a priority during this year. After the legislative session, that's something we'd like to do more of. So,
Yeah.
And JD, thanks for your suggestion. Well,
Yeah, I think in addition to that, educating patients on product types that we have, you don't have to go into brands, you don't have to go into specifics, but we have several categories of products that patients can access throughout the state of Utah, and educating them on maybe proper use of, I mean, no longer storage, but like, here's a gummies, here's what is known. I mean, to do, not talk about the efficacy, but you can talk through how to storage it, how to, I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
people use the frame, go start low and go slow. But yeah, I think something along those lines of more education factors would be beneficial, and it.
Sure.
Have you considered collaborating with pharmacists? Because I know when we did that study, that was the highest trusted person in the cannabis industry as far as patients went. So not saying that you guys don't have an authority in education as well, but maybe
Right.
pairing with pharmacists, that gives you access to a greater broader spectrum of someone who's able to be one-on-one with a patient.
Mhm.
I love the safety, of course, but I honestly don't think any kid's gonna eat an edible. I mean, they leave a nasty taste in your mouth. But
Maybe one then.
maybe,
Right.
yeah, a second time, probably not.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Collaborate with pharmacists.
Mhm.
Yeah, great.
If I can add on, Rich, I just got a couple messages from a couple of our team members who said, in response to one of your questions, when a patient is finally confirmed and receives their card, they do receive information about how to purchase at a pharmacy. And the quarterly newsletter that Rich alluded to earlier, that patient newsletter included how to and who offers home delivery with tips on how to do that.
Right, yeah, good point. And again, people have to voluntarily sign up for that. And we would love for more to always join it, but they volunteer to, subscribe or not, so.
Yeah.
But we've seen that number increase dramatically during the past few months as we have created a newsletter that is specific to patients and a completely separate one that is specific to medical providers. And we're excited that, any of you, all of you should be signed up for both of those. If you're not, you're welcome to go to our website and sign up.
Do you know what the opt-in rate is?
I will research that and get back to you.
Because the other option is you can do an opt-out,
Right, yeah, we're always
just different ways to get.
trying to recruit more to get more education through those newsletters and yeah, that's a good thing to report back to you. We'll let you know.
I think particularly for these patients who fall in the one and done category, over 50,000 patients here. There's really a rich opportunity, I think, for a pharmacist to interact with them, because it could very well be because of a unexpected effect that could be easily addressed by time of dosing or other very easily addressed changes in how the drug is administered.
Yeah.
Resources could be another
Absolutely.
reason why they're unable to purchase.
And in particular, in the 65 and older, if that is representative of the same individuals across time chronologically, it may be getting increasingly difficult for them to get to the medicines that they need. And so,
Okay, anything else anyone else wants to add? Okay. We'll go ahead and just move on to the next item, which is discussing medical cannabis licensing framework, and I'll go and turn the time over to Mr. Lauritsen.
Awesome, thanks, Matt. Hopefully everyone had a chance to review the memo that I wrote. It came out in advance of the substitute of HB 203, so hopefully it'll streamline our discussion just a little bit. I also put together just a short little presentation to make it easier, so you didn't have to read 10 pages if you didn't want to. But essentially, for us as operators, it's licensing has always, proven challenging. I'm sure lawmakers would speak to that. I'm sure regulators would speak to that. It's always seems to be a topic of discussion that seemingly dominates, the legislative session and a lot of conversations outside the session, whether it was the 15th pharmacy license that appeared in statute a few years ago, or whether it was the closed door pharmacies that were proposed and passed into law, through a bill from Representative Walt Brooks. And so, when we've been thinking about licensing, to me, it comes down to there's two considerations on licensing additional pharmacies. There's the question of when those licenses should come online, and then where those licenses should be located. So the proposal that I've kind of put together, and the memo that I wrote, really tries to discern between when a new pharmacy license should be awarded, and where that pharmacy should be located, are really two distinct things. Meaning there's probably criteria that's useful for one or the other of those kind of questions, the when and the where. And so, not all industry, but I know there's a few folks from industry here today, that felt the same way. We wanted to come up with a more data-driven approach to licensing, and really talking about when should additional pharmacy licenses be triggered. And we believe that should be according to the growth of active cardholders. We really believe that the best metric to determine the health of the medical cannabis program in Utah is the number of patients, right? The demand that is present. But just to be clear, we don't think that's necessarily the only metric that should be considered, but it is a pretty good metric that we've been measuring for a number of years now. As you saw in my memo, a number of other states have adopted some form of patient growth metric. Some generally, right, they reach X number of patients, they issue a new license. Others, like a state like Louisiana, or even Alabama, they tie it to, existing licensees can open a new location when they get to X number of patients, at their current location. Or something on a more regional basis. Now, of course, there's programs that are doing it similarly to ours, setting a minimum number of licenses, and then to go above that minimum number, there's some sort of analysis or study that's done. That's our current model. States like Arkansas have set a minimum, they've set a floor and a ceiling. Other states have set hard caps. If you go to Oklahoma or to Mississippi, they've set no caps. And you can see from the memo, kind of the usefulness or not of those types of, licensing, structures. I don't think anyone is here to say, I'll speak for myself and I can let others, speak for themselves, but I'm not here to say that we oppose new licenses, right? We've never opposed new licenses. What we really want and are hoping for, as pharmacies, is some type of clarity around licensing, and really getting to something that's more predictable for everyone, whether it's current operators that are happy with their position, whether it's current operators that are hoping to expand their market position, or whether it's new entrants. As it stands today, the licensing framework that exists depends on a study that some may or may not end up agreeing with, and you can even look at the last study that UDAF did. And I'm not here to comment on the study itself, but I can say from the results of the study, there certainly was some discussion during an executive appropriations committee as to whether the study even supported the issuance of new licenses, right? So the framework we have in place right now does say that there's a bit of kind of, ambiguity to it, and a bit of, certainly on the part of operators, a bit of guesswork as to where it's going to, to net out. So you can go through and you can look at, how do additional pharmacies get licensed, all of those types of things. And I've touched on this already. The current system, I think, can be a bit subjective, and subjectivity kind of always lends itself to creating distrust, confusion, infighting, those types of things. It's also unpredictable. This disadvantages all involved in my my opinion, whether it's current, expanding, or incoming operators. And we don't believe that it prioritizes the most important growth metric, which is patient count. And instead, the majority of the current metrics and criteria are focused more on where a pharmacy should be located, as opposed to when a new pharmacy license should be issued. And really, honestly, outside of the potential for cardholder growth, more of them seem to focus on an urban versus rural, kind of location. And they don't necessarily go to the idea of when a new license should be triggered. So that gets us to where we stand today. You're going to get to hear about HB 203 shortly. And HB 203, the substitute, did heed these things, and it's now for certain licenses, not these independent or quasi-independent pharmacy licenses that will be issued, is setting forth a criteria where whoever the licensing authority ends up being, whether it be ends up being this new ombudsman or whether it remains with UDAF. The idea would be that they, for issuing these like kind of the non-independent licenses, they would have to consider the number of patients in the program as well as kind of the economic impact that would, come from opening, or issuing more licenses. So I definitely feel like that is a step in the right direction. I think the concern there then is while we now have given kind of a good, like kind of broad theme to what should be considered, whether it's the ombudsman or whether it's UDAF, who does licensing, that criteria needs to be further defined, whether in statute or in rule. And we have an example of this already happening previously. When DHHS was in charge of licensing pharmacies, they took that general licensing criteria, right, which is the adequate supply, something of medical cannabis. They then established, I remember working directly with Rich on this, they established some further criteria to be considered in rule. And I believe that was just adopted over by UDAF when they took over regulations. So there's already kind of precedent for setting forth kind of general themes of what should be considered in statute, and then either further clarifying that in statute at a later point in time, or having, the administrative rules process, take care of it. So as it stands now, my proposal, is more so that we issue a recommendation to support the general themes that are in HB 203 around, pharmacy licensing, but that whoever ends up ultimately with the control over licensing, whether it be the ombudsman, UDAF, or someone else, that criteria be further fleshed out before any of those licenses are awarded. Because in my mind, you would just be trading one version of subjectivity for another. And I think that's what we're trying to get, away from. So I know that's a big mouthful of stuff. Happy to answer any questions, or happy to have you all discuss, amongst yourselves. But I appreciate the time. Thanks for letting me present that.
Yeah. I mean, so just more for procedure here. Your recommendation that you mentioned was to mirror what HB 203 is saying.
Generally, but with the recommendation that whoever ends up with the licensing authority, whether it be this new, this potentially newly created ombudsman, or whether it stays with UDAF, or who knows, maybe Rich will take it back over, you never know. But whoever ultimately has the licensing authority and who has to consider those broad criteria set forth in law, that before they issue any of those licenses, they either go back in front of the legislature and have the legislature approve further criteria, or if it's through rulemaking authority, that it go through the rulemaking process that, that currently exists. Because what does it mean to say you shall consider patient count? I mean, I looked at the 90,000 number and I considered it. That could go all the way from something that easy to something much deeper, but you would think it would be on the much deeper side of things, but you just don't know. And the same thing with talking about economic impact. What's economically impactful to Blake and Zion might be different than what's economically impactful to UDAF, right? And other stakeholders that they may meet with. And so just trying to find, look, I think there will always inherently be some form of subjectivity that exists in licensing. That's just the way it works. You can't really ever get to truly objective, factors. But we do need some better predictability. And I think this is a step in the right direction. It just seems like it's going to need to be drilled down on in either future legislative sessions or in rule, depending on who has, the ultimate say on licensing.
Yeah.
I just have to say, I've been asking for like a rubric in which they would say when licenses and where licenses would be issued from the beginning. It's like, we do know we have access problems for people in rural areas. We also know that the pharmacy that we did issue in a rural area is never even broke even. They're losing money all the time. So, in order to do this in a way that creates a healthy industry for patients to be able to use, I think we have to have some kind of rubric just so we know when we can issue them. But there has to be, like, people have franchises all the time. There's got to be some kind of rule in which they use, like, don't be this close to each other, don't, you have to have this many people in the area that are willing to shop, like. But then Cody had a point once when or was it Brandon? Maybe let's blame Brandon because he's not here. But he said, when you provide access in an area, then we have seen growth in that area. And so, there's a lot of things at play here, but if we don't come up with some type of system, then these licenses are going to be issued, and then eventually, and I'm not saying this is happening now, and I'm not saying that it would happen, but it becomes a lot harder for me as like a patient advocate to ask for more licenses, or if there's no rubric. I can't fight against the big lobbyists and say, oh, we need more access. So then once all of industry is happy, we're done, right? And so I would like a rubric. It keeps industry healthy, and I think it gives us an idea on how we can grow this program for patients. So I wish I had the ability to make this. I have tried for years. I faked a couple things. I asked ChatGPT, but guess what? I can't do it. So I think someone who knows how should.
Well, and just for a point of reference, I mean, there was a meeting to discuss HB 203 on Friday last week up at the Capitol, and I know many of you here were present, whether in person or in Zoom, and this was discussed. And I mean, just for reference, I know some of the legislators are in favor of it, some are not in favor of how it would be proposed, in that when you just say when you're looking at patient count alone,
Yeah.
active patients, is that the right number? There's got to be a combination of a few in order to make that work. And, I was thinking, how ultimately, how's Utah's health of a market? And I was pulling up December's numbers because I didn't have January at the time, but I mean, currently Utah has 2.71% of all Utah citizens have a medical cannabis card. That's our percentage. When you look at where a medical cannabis pharmacy is located, regardless if it's rural or urban, that number is typically higher. There are a few instances where it's not. But one, I mean, I know people talk about Carbon County all the time, right? They have the highest percentage of patients with a medical cannabis card at 4.4%. So obviously something is working. And the only thing that's in there that's different is from all the other rural areas, is they have a pharmacy. So getting access proves that you can grow the market. Whether or not it's sustainable, and I know that was another factor that HB 203 is trying to address by looking at the economic factors. I don't know if necessarily that's the state's problem. I know it's a problem if access isn't there and patients lose that access. That's where their concern needs to be. But as a production establishment, my profitability shouldn't be depending on whether the state allows it or not. They need, I mean, if they're going to be issuing additional licenses based off those, I mean, hopefully you could see the same result, that patient growth would happen. And there's plenty of counties in here that don't have a pharmacy, but yet they're at that same level. So there could be a need to have pharmacies in multiple counties on however you look at it. And so I think, I agree that there needs to be some sort of a clear defined path would be fantastic for everyone. Giving that responsibility to one person. And that's kind of why I brought up if you were just good with HB 203, because I don't know we can propose something based off of this, but if it's already going to be an HB 203, do we just move on to that and have that be, or do you want a separate proposal?
I don't think so. And I think what you're confounding is the when versus the where question. I think that, this idea that the only factor that industry wanted, the pharmacy licenses wanted considered was the number of patients is just not true. We believe that to be the best metric, but we don't think it's the only metric that needs to be considered. And of course, the hope is, it's the Field of Dreams concept. You build it and they will come. Of course, you've seen an increase in the number of patients in Price, right? Or in Carbon County. Is that enough though to sustain that business? So what you hope you get from this is a kind of well-rounded approach to licensing. I think what you hope to see is some sort of predictability around the idea of when, because for you, Matt, as a producer, That might not be as much of a question for you on the viability of your business, when a new pharmacy license is going to come online. But I can tell you, if you had a pharmacy license or you end up obtaining one, you certainly will want the when question to be answered. So I think what we're looking for is a well-rounded approach that takes into consideration when a new license comes online. That's more of what my proposal is. And then where those are located, sounds like there's already a whole lot of stuff in the law that exists that could be considered. But if you look at HB 203, I don't want to get too far ahead of it, there is an entire concept around how they plan to address rural access through these independent or quasi-independent pharmacies, which you, sir, can obtain, but a business that's already has a pharmacy license cannot, right? So there's got to be the give and the take to all of this. And I think the only thing that I'm trying to say through my proposal and through my memo is that if we can find a way to get to a better level of predictability, everyone will win. And if patient count is what we think is the best measure of a program's health, it should behoove all of us to try to get more patients in the program, whether those people are in Carbon County, whether those people are in Salt Lake County. But we also should be considering, I get it, you know, there's people that have said, well, it shouldn't be the job of government to determine the success or not of a business. There's already been enough stuff passed into law in various times over various years where they've been concerned about the success of businesses or not. The anti-competitive business language that was attached to the law last year is clearly concerned about who's able to be successful as a business or not. So I don't think we should say that that's not what government is interested in doing or not. I think what we should be saying is, what criteria should government be using, whether it's an ombudsman or whether it's a regulatory agency, to determine, trying to give us a better level of predictability. Because honestly, every year, it seems to be the same thing by the time we get to this year. Some form of licensing comes up and honestly derails a lot of the other conversations that we should be having about improving and preserving Utah's medical cannabis program before it goes adult use. To me, that's the biggest boogeyman in the room. 50% of voters, right, that were surveyed on this favor an adult use program. That's only going to grow over time if you look at the demographics based upon who's answering those survey results. So I generally support the direction in which HB 203 is going. It's just that then needs to be taken, that kind of generalized framework, and drilled down on and made more specific. And look, I don't think we'll ever get to a licensing criteria that every single person is happy with. What we need to do is get it to where we can all live with it, and that it takes into account both existing businesses as well as patients, as well as, you know, potential businesses. It's a more well-rounded, you know, approach, because even a report that UDAF put out that they think warrants 4 additional licenses publicly was challenged as to whether that analysis even warranted 4 additional licenses, right? Like we couldn't even get there with the criteria we currently, you know, have. So I think that it needs to be a well-rounded approach. And this really only goes after one part of it, but I certainly support the idea of, you even see from the proposal, right? Potential other criteria if people have them. But there's gotta be some, you know, finality to this. You know, I know that's, you know, final for a year or whatever it is, but an idea just so people can plan and understand like where it's all gonna go. And also guarding against over licensing, because you want to talk about the worst thing we could do is oversaturate the market and turn into, read the stuff that Trevor found for me from a research perspective around, you know, what states like Oklahoma and Mississippi are doing. And I'm not saying Utah's going to go in that direction, but once you kind of put ink on paper, it's kind of hard to take it back off.
Well, and a little bit on that vein, one of the things that, because obviously access is big, and I want access for patients in every small town, right? And we do have delivery, and we kind of hoped that that would provide that. But, and this is one of the things that maybe I hope to have industry or Department of Health or Ag, somebody help explain to me today is, or anytime, is if we issue too many licenses. So you look at a state like Oklahoma, you know, the big boogeyman is, that 50% turns into 70%, we go wreck, right? But what I'm also concerned about is the idea that if we issue too many licenses in one area, and if Misty and I are too close to each other and now we're competing over the same group of patients, instead of this race to provide better quality products, right? We're trying to stop seizures, we're honing in on certain terpenes. Do we now become this spike to just be able to get patients in the door and provide cheaper product and drop our cost? Now, dropping cost is awesome, but I want to drop cost without dropping quality. And
Safety.
yeah, and safety, for sure, not safety. And so, what is that benchmark in which we lose the race to provide good quality, safe product, and now we're trying to keep our doors open? I want to avoid that and still provide access. I'd like, and maybe that's not a concern. Maybe that's just a fear that I have. I got that fear from speaking with a national organization that kind of governs or oversees all the states. So maybe that's unfounded, but I would like, it sounds reasonable to me that they would try to just keep their doors open. So how do we provide access while keeping quality high? And again, I think it comes down to, we need some type of a rubric.
We'll hop in here for a minute.
I think this is the right guy for the job.
Well, Des, I think you're spot on with those comments. I think that's what everyone's trying to achieve, and make sure businesses can be successful while providing access. And how do you find the rubric, as you mentioned it? I wanted to ask a question maybe to JD and maybe Trevor. When I was looking at what the research was done, looked like other communities are using general numbers, population growth, number of new cardholders percentage. And it seems like they've solidified on one. Did you see any examples where they were trying to create some sort of rubric, some sort of mechanisms in which would trigger this? Because I think that's a laudable goal, but there's so many variables that impact whether businesses will be successful, that I just wanted to see if there was anything else on that vein.
So of those that use patient count, they just use patient count, right? They've decided on a number. How they've arrived at those numbers, I can't necessarily say. Trevor might be able to say more, but they just have a number that they decide on. And then the majority of the other states essentially just give full authority to the regulating body to determine how many licenses should be issued, when those should be issued, up to, either above a minimum number or up to, a maximum number. Or if you're in certain places, they've put a hard cap on the licenses, so there is no rubric, or there's no cap on the licenses. So I didn't drill down into necessarily what those states that give authority or to the regulating body. I'm not sure they do. I'm guessing they just probably get to make the decisions, because I didn't see anything in the materials that Trevor provided for me. So I think what we're trying to do is to do something that others have not. And really just to say, hey, we believe that part of your rubric should be essentially what HB 203 is saying at this point, which is we need to take into consideration patient count and the economic impact that more licenses will have. But those are not the only factors that could necessarily be considered, right? I think that answers the when question the best way it can, and it gives some predictability. So whether it's every 10,000 patients, 50,000 patients, whatever that number ends up being, right? That's where my recommendation would be to put that in the hands of either the licensing authority, the legislature, or the ombudsman if they're created, right? But to just say you have to consider patient count, while a good start, doesn't seem to really develop a rubric, right? And to say you have to consider economic impact, well, what is economic impact, right? And I get that we're never going to probably get to a totally precise definition of everything unless we essentially say like, hey, every X patients, or it can only have X amount of impact on your top line revenue or whatever it is from an economic impact, point of view. But we should probably go deeper than just, where it stands in HB 203, even though that's a step in the right, direction. So I think, Ken, to answer your question is basically no, not that I've seen that anyone's come up with anything. The majority where people stand is to just leave it in the, up to the licensing, authority. And I imagine that's probably popular for some and probably not popular for others. I will say though, I think this is one of the areas where I've seen the most collaboration amongst industry together over an idea too, right? So I think it's shown that, industry is willing to, get behind, something like this, knowing that more patients is going to mean more orders. It's going to be more dollars spent in the program. It's likely to try to help bring, if more patients are spending more money and making more orders, the cost of medicine should continue to come down, and that 50% of patients not shopping in the market on a monthly basis come back in. And then hopefully, if we can make some other changes around QMPs and some other things, that'll attract some of those patients that left the program to come back, because 150, 160,000 patients, kind of where we would have been going, right? If we were still on track, would be a pretty good number. And I'm not sure you would have to hear, too much more discussion. So it really is the measure of the health of the program. It's not the only measure, but it seems to be a pretty good measure. And so I do, applaud, Representative Daley Provo for making those changes in the bill. I just think it needs to go, a level deeper. I think that's all the more the proposal is. It's not saying what other factors should be considered. I think we could try to do that as a group. But I imagine that means there needs to be conversations amongst a lot of different folks and stakeholders.
Support of that. Thanks for that explanation, JD. I was, as you were talking, predictability was one of those things that in my mind is what we're trying to achieve for the industry. Is they know when it's coming, they know how it's going to impact them. That's one of the most important things in business. So coming up with a metric in which that can be measured would be very helpful. I know you're not coming in saying, hey, how about these 10 variables? Let's measure all 10 of these. I think it's important, though, for the industry and this group as a whole to be able to provide some input as those are developed. And I do follow with your recommendation on having some sort of data-driven items that help this be predictable.
Certainly, and I appreciate that, Ken. And I think one of the things we could do as part of our recommendation is that whether it's the ombudsman, whether it's DHHS or whoever it is that ultimately ends up with licensing authority, that they would have to work with the policy advisory board directly, as well as other stakeholders, right, to develop that criteria. And I think that's what you kind of see in HB 203 is, at least with the economic impact, right? It talks about them meeting with and discussing with, the relevant stakeholders, kind of what that economic impact would be. So I think it's already tending to go in that direction, that this should be a collaborative approach, and that not one single person or one single department, should ultimately have the say on what that criteria is. But that criteria is going to differ depending on what lens you're looking through. But ultimately, the question of when is what we would like to try to nail down and make it as predictable as as possible. And if that proves unworkable, then those things can be revisited. But it just seems by and large that we spend so much of our time, on this every year. And I think there's a way we can tackle the when and the where all in one go.
Chris has his hand raised.
Yeah, hi. So I think one of the things that I haven't heard discussed much in terms of looking at some of the data as far as when and where to put or issue licenses in particular areas for new pharmacies would be determining wait times in the current pharmacies in relation to the current population of medical cannabis card holders in that geographic region. I can tell you here in Cache Valley with just the one pharmacy we have, I've waited quite some time there, and much longer in some instances where it would have been faster to drive across the mountain to Brigham City, where there's very little wait time, get what I need, and be back home where I still would have been waiting in the waiting room. So I think that might be one of the parameters that we may want to consider looking at in terms of collecting pharmacy volumes, monthly volumes, and perhaps I'm quite certain none of them track wait times but one of the things we could consider is surveying medical cannabis card holders in terms of what their perceptions are as far as how long they're waiting when they show up at a pharmacy. Because I certainly that's been one of the things that's driven me to go across the mountain. Just when I walk in that waiting room and I see 10 or 15 people sitting there, and I'm there for 45 minutes before I can even check in and go back. Might be something that we could look at in terms of where we're getting some bottlenecks as far as access to the pharmacies that currently exist.
I don't know if they have anything else. Questions for JD? I don't have a proposal.
Want to take public?
We can't, we can do. See, we'll open up to public comment. If you're online, if you want to raise your hand, and then when it gets to you, we'll select you. If you're here in the room, if you want to come and add something, you have something new to add, please step up. Well, we just get their hands raised, so that way we're ready for them.
Hi guys, the Dragonfly. I'm here to speak specifically from the perspective of being an operator of the 15th pharmacy license, which was specifically utilized to put into an underserved area. And I'm here to let you guys know there are significant headwinds and challenges in operating in an underserved area. They do not have the same resources as urban areas. So they certainly should be looked at a very different lens. I think the bill provisions in HB 203 did a lot to address some of these things that could help, such as reduce licensing fees. One big challenge in a rural area is how do you get a pharmacist to go work in that area? And what happens if that pharmacist calls out? It's very expensive to have just a backup pharmacist. So there's a lot of these little tiny things that make it really challenging. And I'm here to open let you guys know, since we've opened day one in January of almost 2 years ago, we've operated a loss every single month that we've been there. And that's not without trying. The reality is Carbon County only has 907 active medical card patients. Based on Department of Health data, we know only half of those people purchase in a 30-day period, which means on a great month, we're serving 500 patients. Average ticket size is an underserved area is roughly under $100 for purposes of math. We'll just use $100. 500 patients at $100, you're looking at $50,000 a month in revenue. Half of that cost of that revenue, 25 grand, goes directly to the processors to pay for the product. You're left with $25,000 left to pay for your 280E tax, is roughly 15% of your gross. That's already gone out of that. And then you have your pharmacists, which benefits, salaries, you're looking at $14,000 to $15,000 a month. And then you're left with that to pay the rest of your employees, to pay the lights, to pay MJ Freeway, to pay SAF subscriptions, on and on and on. So those are just the realities. It's not me complaining as an operator, because we made a commitment to the community in price, and we continue to move that commitment for price. But what I'm concerned about is everybody who comes behind us, and if I could have an extra minute, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Everybody who comes behind us is going into a losing battle, right? We've had 2 years to try this, figure this out. Other operators in less than rural areas has taken them 3 to 4 years just to become profitable. So that's the concern, is that we open up these doors and they close down quicker than we can even do it. Those go into receivership. And quite frankly, it's the same writing on the wall of every single market ahead of us. And that's something that's also important to us, that sometimes we forget there's 36 other states that have gone through exactly what we're doing, the same exact demise, with the same level of thinking and the same level of decision making. Here we have an opportunity to do things different, right? To not just open it up and think that having access equals to more competition and lower prices. It has not happened. You could look at Oklahoma, you could even look at California, the world's largest cannabis market, and even a place like that can succeed. So there's a lot of factors to consider, but the single biggest factor that's on the bill on the table now, 10 more seconds, Matt, sorry, is there is a bill on the table that will allow any doctor with a controlled substance license to prescribe cannabis. That is the single biggest factor into why people can't get into the program. The doctors aren't there to help.
Yeah. Blake, if you have anything to add about the medical cannabis licensing framework, you want to try and stick it on topic, please?
Yep. So, thank you. Blake Smith from Zion Pharmaceuticals. I'm in complete support of what Jeannie said, where and when becomes extremely important. And I'm not gonna make an argument of sustainability. I'm gonna talk about unsustainability real briefly. There's two criteria for unsustainability. One, you don't actually have enough money to continue to operate your business. So to Nara's point, in Cedar City, it took us 3 years to get profitable. 3 years where we were taking a loss every single month. The second thing that's unsustainable is if you have shareholders that have taken in money and they demand that you do something more than break even. Right? Because we're not subsidized in any way. We have to get money. We can't get it from banks. They have to get it from somebody else. So if they demand something that's better than breaking even or loss, that's an unsustainable business. The health department and Health and Human Services should absolutely care about the state and health of the business. And this is why. If we actually look at this statistically, and you bring more patients into an area by starting a pharmacy, and then also more people become reliant on that medicine, and then that pharmacy is unsustainable, you now have a net loss at what those patients can do. And so from a simple t-test, we can actually look at the ramifications about how that shifts. And if you have patients who are underserved in an area because you don't have access there versus starting something, increasing access to something, and then taking it away has a more significant impact. And so typically for Health and Human Services, when we look at this, you should be doing things for the good of the many, not good for the few, which is why you can do things during COVID and everything else that we talk about. And so creating situations for unsustainable businesses is extremely problematic. Now, I am in favor of figuring out ways around this, by the way. I actually think can I have 30 more seconds?
It's fine.
I do think there's ways that we can figure this out, whether it's a mobile program, whether or not changing licensing fees. I think there's ways that it can be done, but I'm in complete agreement with Judy. There has to be some kind of actual criteria for us to determine what that is. And I actually think industry would agree if we can come up with the right criteria, let somebody have a chance to go figure this out. We're okay with that and we would support it. We may even to be able to discount product potentially, but we can't do it just under the same criteria we have.
You know, if you had, I will share the same sentiment. I won't echo too much, but operating in a rural town in Brigham City. Up north, we operated a loss for about 2.5 years. Fortunately, we had Salt Lake City to help work that operation. And so being operational there as well as operating in a market in California, you know, the lack of attentiveness to licensure led to oversaturation, which my team had to exit, and a lot of my legacy colleagues who have been doing this for 20-30 years are closing their businesses and working at Denny's now, or they're backdooring and selling things in. So seeing where, you know, to echo Nara's point, where a lot of other states have made similar mistakes because they kind of copied what was done before them. I think we have an opportunity to look at it holistically, not to compare our program to DABS. The DABS even has a formula to factor in additional licenses with additional population. Normally, in some markets, the 3% patient population to population was the threshold before it went adult use. I think here, if we do things well, we don't have to worry about that 3% threshold. But if we also look at other variables to tie in maybe patient population relative to total population, because as our population grows, we would hope that the patient population also grows with that. But the root of all of that, the common denominator, is all the patient count. So I think they're in full support. We are in full support of some data-driven metric with the primary focus looking at patient count.
Thank you. Like 2 minutes.
Yeah, Alex Orge with Holson Co. Obviously, Jerry, colleague of mine, I support what he's proposed today. I think the one point I wanted to make, and I would encourage everyone to support the first option that was recommended by JD. is that, you know, the goals we accomplish are the ones that we focus on. Having patient count being something that we're focused on is going to help increase our ease of access. It's going to help us with those 60,000 patients that have left the program to focus on how do we get them to return. I think uniting people around a goal, especially our you know, our industry, our regulators, our legislators, to try to determine how can we get patients to get into this program. I think that's that recommendation that includes patient count being a defining metric is really important. So that's my recommendation. I'll keep it short.
Some standard wellness. I support the concept of a rubric and some more reliable and some certainty for industry on additional licenses. Standard was one of the companies that got a cultivation processing license that did not have retail. And I was not shy talking to regulators and legislators about trying to get pharmacies on it. And I gotta say, it's a bit frustrating now. I pushed on it for 4 or 5 years. We went and spent significant amount of money to purchase a company that also had a pharmacy license so we can obtain a pharmacy. And now we're talking about providing some certainty on that. That we had asked for 5 years. Nobody wanted to have a conversation about it, and now we do. So we support that concept. We may not have gone to purchase and spent millions of dollars to buy a company with a license if we knew that this was coming. Now it's here. We support that concept because I think it's best for the industry. We can't just go to Zions Bank down the road and ask for a loan to spend $1 million roughly to get a pharmacy up and running. We have to go to private investors, predatory lenders that are in the cannabis space. Those things take significant amounts of time. And so without having some certainty in when these things happen, it's very difficult for companies to get to be ready to apply for pharmacy, to get it up and running in a timely manner, and to be successful in the long term. I know a lot of the legislators, regulators, others see the top line numbers that are coming into the program. I'd encourage you to look at the bottom line numbers as well. What the expenses are to run the program, to deal with regulations, security, the purchasing product, everything else, because it's just not the top line number. Nobody's bringing that home. There are all sorts of other expenses that go on.
Thank you, Scott. Abby, do we have anyone online who raised their hand? Does not look like it. Okay. And so, I mean, if we're looking at a program as a whole, have we been successful? Have we served the patients? And coming up with some sort of specific guideline can be helpful to the entire industry, but also can be helpful to the patients. And I think, yeah.
Oh, no, finish and then I have a question.
Oh, no, you're good. So I think really I think is as we go through this is the more specific we can be as a board to the legislators. Just telling them we want a rubric. We've done that. We've done proposals like that in the past, been kind of vague. And a lot of times, sometimes they'll even they didn't move anywhere, or they want more specifics. I think if we're looking for something specific as far as what a goal is, that's kind of what we should be looking at.
Well, I think that would be the whole idea of meeting with whoever the authority ultimately is to come up with that rubric, because there is a rubric that has been presented that wasn't necessarily popular. So I think it's not totally genuine to say we have to come with something that's more specific. People already have. Now they've gone back to a more general concept that we're hopefully going to support, and that we will then work with them to come up with a more specific rubric. But that's why I also put in the last part of my proposal. If you've got a better criteria, if you've got a better criteria, I would love to hear it. You know what I mean? So I'm not claiming to have all the answers, and I don't think anyone is. I think it's going to be a collaborative approach. But of course, yeah, I would love to say, hey, let's go with every 25,000 patients. But is that the answer? Is that the number? I can't say. For some it may be, for some it might not be. So I think all we can do at this point is support a general rubric around these two concepts. that then we hopefully, the licensing authority then works with us and other relevant stakeholders to come up with what's more specific. But to this point, no one's really studied this, right? No one's really delved into this too much, right? And yeah, this is gonna be, and no pun intended, but blazing a new trail, for how licenses are considered. And if we don't want to get over our skis on this, that now is the time to, now's the time to do it. And there's gonna be a lot of different opinions, but hopefully we can decide, we can land on the least worst thing for everyone involved. But we'll hopefully, as Alex said, give us a common goal to unite around. Because if we think that patient count is really what's going to get us all to where we want to go, whether as patients, whether as businesses, whether as anyone else, then hey, that seems like a pretty laudable goal to follow. What that number is, that I think is what's going to take the further discussion and analysis.
Des?
Mine just, comes back to patient quality too, and I was wondering if maybe we just ask a question, or if anybody wants to offer anything, or maybe we have I've said enough and maybe I was accurate, but when people are saying like our business is struggling and we're, am I correct in saying that the first things to start to suffer is, quality and product, or patient, the patient interactions, or having enough staff at the pharmacy? When these businesses say, we're going to be struggling, what I hear is, what does that look like for patients? Like, what are they missing out on? Because at the end of the day, we're here to serve patients medication. This isn't like, oh, my business is struggling and now, that's, it's not just a boutique. This is a medical facility. If they're struggling, patients are going to suffer in either the quality or the availability of their medication. And where I do not believe that it is, ever the government's job to make sure that a business is successful, we've kind of made a promise that patients would get access to good quality product here. And anyway, I guess my question is, am I wrong in saying that? Am I wrong? Is that not a concern that I should be having?
That quality will slip? No, I mean, I think absolutely that is. I mean, it's not just quality, it's the patient interactions, right? I mean, if a pharmacy can't pay their obligations, then they're going to lose employees.
Right.
And they're going to have longer wait times. If they don't have a pharmacist, then they can't even sell products. I mean, that's another thing that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, less resources.
But I mean, right, it's not just saying, the quality of products will diminish. It's the quality of the interaction the patient's having with and getting their access to the medicine.
The quality of the program.
The program in general
decrease
would
as
decrease.
resources decrease.
Absolutely.
Across any metric you want to measure.
But I think, I mean, for us, is having this sort of benchmark in place makes sense. It's something that, I mean, people have asked for forever. It was just kind of more that you didn't talk about it. It was the out of sight, out of mind approach. And so I think, and now that it is being addressed, and that's what's hard, I think, for the vote that we'll be having today, I think is just supporting and just reassuring that, as a policy advisory board, we feel that the direction they're going is what's needed. And then whether or not what that criteria looks like, that's a further discussion, I guess, down the road. So with that, is there anything else? Yes.
You do have Alex with Pure Utah. I think he just put his hand up about a minute ago, if you'd like to allow him to speak.
Sure.
I think we've heard enough from public comment, so we'll just continue on. I mean, we were at that point to take a proposal, so I'd rather, unless it's a compelling argument, to not have it at all.
Okay, well, with that in mind, I appreciate the discussion. I appreciate the public comment, the feedback from everyone. As you can see, this is not an easy issue, right? But one that, is worth tackling, because I think, as we all agree, patients will benefit if we get this right. So I think my motion would be to recommend to the legislature that the Policy Advisory Board generally supports the licensing framework criteria around considering patient count and consulting around economic impact. However, we further recommend that those criteria be more specifically spelled out in law or rule, depending on who ends up with the final licensing authority. So I've been practicing that one in the mirror since this morning.
Second.
I had to practice it again, after the sub came out this morning, so I had it already and then I had to practice it, again, so.
Can't do the
I
second.
can't
I'll
second it.
second that motion.
With people to license.
Yesterday was someone else. Tomorrow's gonna be. That's all you do. We're getting right back to you, JD. I don't think it'll be either one of us. No, you didn't.
Okay, yep, I think we can take the roll call vote.
Okay.
Or do you want to read, or do you want to read back?
You read it back.
Let's read it back, so we. So
That's a good idea.
It sounds terrible.
In addition to the language in HB 203, we further recommend that those criteria be more specifically spelled out in law or rule, depending on who ends up with the ultimate licensing authority.
I think we would probably want to just reference what that language is in 203.
I can take it by line
Yeah,
number
yeah,
and
and you'll be able to go back into
Sure.
the, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, but that's generally
Make a
correct.
nice copy.
I'm just gonna burn your sign.
Okay.
Let's start with Jenny Higgs,
Yes.
JD Lorenzen,
Yes.
Chris Morgan,
Yes.
Matthew Page,
Yes.
Misty Smith,
Yes.
Kent Anderson,
Yes.
Nana Ferresi,
Yes.
and Tammy Clark.
Yes.
Oh, and Desiree Hayes.
Sorry, we already had a one.
It's fine. I don't usually have anything to say anyway.
Okay. With that, it passes unanimously, and we'll go ahead and move on to the next item, which is SB 64. So this is the items under consideration that are going through right now. This is Senator Vickers' bill. There was a meeting in regards to this 2 weeks ago, I think it was.
Yeah.
And just kind of talking through it. So did everyone have a chance to kind of read through this? I mean, I know we can, is there anything in particular that you wanted to address? Or are there any concerns that you had within this? This really is just to kind of present to us. Obviously, this is going through right now. So I'll kind of go through just the rough notes real quick. So obviously there's some administrative changes. And as far as the production establishment board, they'll now be reviewing all applications with assistance from staff, additional staff. So business practices. So this one it talks about the language of for production establishments and the pharmacy licensing board, as far as investigating potential anti-competitive business practices. It takes language from the Attorney General and puts it as the defined rule. Specifies that a courier agent is prohibited from registering if they've been convicted of a felony in the previous 10 years. So what's the current rule on felonies for working in the industry?
Most of it's within the last 10 years, we're just cleaning up.
Is it just to mirror that?
Agents that are still all time.
Yeah. Let's see. So this one just adds courier licensing to the establishment and pharmacy licensing advisory board. Removes their December requirement, so they can meet whenever. So, but let's see, name on cards. So they're going to be, so this is more for agents who work in a production establishment. It just gets rid of the work name, so now they can just move between businesses. There is a lot of people, once you're in the industry, you tend to stay in the industry. So it makes it easier because the agent itself, it has a card, and they're carded, so it just moves with them. Dispensing bags, you can now take your own bag to the pharmacy and use that instead of theirs, as long as it's opaque. So, ownership, so that's just changes. Video surveillance. Again, it's just more language makes the pharmacy have 45 days of footage. It's the same as every other production establishment. EVS changes from the Department of Health. It talks about the continuing education for a QMP. And then, let's see, removes the requirement that medical cannabis card contains some information. There was more information than what was needed. So now that just limits what's on there, but it's still enough to identify the patient as that's their card. And then, let's see. And then reports. The Department of Health will still continue to give reports. And same as the Department of Ag, just removes duplicate reports because they've had the same report to give. But any points of interest or anything on FP 64? I think one of the big things that's in there is it this one that talks about the controlled substance for QMP? No, it's another bill that's gonna be coming out.
No,
This first sub, I think, or it will be in the second sub? No, it's in,
I think it'll be.
Yeah, it's not in there yet.
yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, no, because
It'll be-
that's Rays and Escamias.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we'll move on. Does anyone have anything else to add for SB 64? I think I just kept talking. No, okay, perfect. We'll move on to HB 203.
Did we need to take any vote in support or?
No, I mean,
Okay.
not necessarily. Unless there's anything we wanted, I think, changed. I think it's for as a whole, everyone who's kind of had time to look
Yeah.
at it is in favor of
Yeah.
the changes that are being made. A lot of it is just cleanup.
Yeah, housekeeping.
Yeah, right now it's much more regulatory bill than it is.
Yeah.
HB 203 is a very large bill with a lot of changes. So I do want to thank Trevor for putting together kind of a snapshot of all the changes that's been going on. We did receive another one today because there were some changes submitted this morning for a substitute bill number 1. So you do have a second page in there. That's like, that's just called first substitute bill summary.
And that, just to be clear, sorry,
Yeah.
just to be clear,
This is just the additions or
I'm saying-
changes.
yes, I'm saying the licensing stuff that we just spoke about
Mhm.
was from the substitute bill, not the original
Yeah.
version, just so everyone's clear when we were talking about HB 203, that we were talking about the substitute.
So we'll kind of go through. I do have a summary provided from the policy analyst on HB 203. Do you have a copy of that, Abby, to share? I think of that.
Are you talking about the legislature's copy?
Yeah, the one that I just got from Rich.
And we could print it out.
The,
I can go run upstairs and print
Yeah.
it really quickly.
Yeah, if you want to, yeah, if you want
Is
to
that
get
in
it.
relation to the sub?
It, yeah,
Let me,
yeah, it has, it's everything. Yeah, it's about just.
couple of.
So. No. Not absolutely.
you did it in an hour,
Well, it's not
like
hard.
9,000
All you
hours.
gotta do is just look for that red underline.
Yeah, underline, yes, there's a lot of changes. So, has anyone had a chance to read through this at all? If not, you have missed out. I've read through it multiple times. There were a couple changes that I kind of want to talk through when it comes through this, the substitute. There's some additions in there that I think could be important. But we'll kind of go through, let's just go through the first channel. I'm wanting to. What's the best way to go through this? So the first memo you guys have is just the cannabis amendments bill summary. That's not sub 1. So we'll kind of go through some of these changes in here and then go into more detail. I'll probably skip over the ombudsman because a lot of the other changes were added in sub 1,
Yeah.
included in that too. So one of the things that there's some licensing changes and that it actually puts a cap on the processing facility licenses. That is something that MCPAB did vote on last year. As far as,
Do you have any concerns that about, like, not with the cap itself, but capping the ability of current cultivators or future cultivators to get a processing license?
that was what I was going to bring up is, so there's currently, just for your record, there are currently 16 licensed processors in Utah. And there's 2 more that are in process of getting their card. So we're already capped at this point. And the 2 that are working on it have already gotten approvals. So
That would mean no more process.
so essentially we're done. So the cap that we're setting is at the ceiling. And to JD's point, there is a big concern because we do have the ability to expand the cultivation up to 15 licenses. So that essentially tells you that there could be 7 new businesses that essentially all they could do is just sell material, and they can actually sell packaged flower. That's it. So,
Which even then, they can only package it for wholesale, right, Cody? You know, they can't package it
correct.
for the final product.
no,
right?
not for fun.
So they could move
Yeah.
it to a processor and that would be
Correct.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that to me, that probably is the crux there. Like, I know we voted in favor of a cap and I can understand it's the only license in the market without a cap, but it would seem like that needs to be changed, especially because you already
Yep.
just said we're at the cap.
Yep.
So we're either gonna have to wait a whole year in statute to revisit it, or they can make a change to either do, I think what I hear you saying, which is
Mhm.
increase that cap to say 25 or something.
25.
And then let, folks come in and get those licenses, or leave the cap at 18. And say, but if you have a cultivation license, you get one, or maybe what would be better is to just put a cap on the number of completely independent processors, right, like you're a standalone processor. But I can't remember what our recommendation was. I thought our recommendation was just some form of a cap.
We just did.
I didn't think we got like specific
We
as to
did.
like what the,
Can we add the number on the cap, on the processor cap?
I
to be
mean, we
decided
can make
by-
a recommendation. Absolutely.
Well, yeah, but before we make recommendations, maybe we should hear my brilliant ideas, but like. We're gonna have somebody looking at this rubric for licensing of other of pharmacies, maybe they could. Let's decide the process.
I mean, I think the JD's point, right, is as a cultivator gets a license, them not having the ability to have a processor is a huge, I mean, if you have no way to sell products, then
Right.
you're not gonna get into the space. And so as we find a need to expand, it's gonna make it difficult too. And so I think a rubric, I think is already, I mean, that's really for getting a license. Getting a license has never been a difficult thing because it has been open-ended.
Yeah.
Anyone who applied got a license, as long as they can meet the criteria as far as what's already out there, and that hasn't been difficult to prove. I think the concern we had and why it got brought to our board was it was just the unknown of what happened. And a big argument that was heard by multiple individuals was if a big MSO comes in and gets a processor license, they're gonna undercut me. And that was more speaking towards the independent processors, those that didn't have access to their own supply of biomass, right?
Yeah.
And so those are ones who have to rely on those with the current cultivation license. And so, I mean, I think just capping it flat at 18 will make it difficult for anyone to want to come in.
Mhm.
I think having the flexibility and maybe you do reserve 7 of them for future cultivators.
because that's the potential.
That's the
number that
potential
it
number.
could grow to from 8 to 15, right?
Correct. Yeah. Is that Cody? Is that
Yeah.
still correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or similar to what they do with cultivation licenses currently, right? You could have 2 locations under a singular, cultivation license, but I also know there's some processors who I believe have 2 processing licenses, right? Because they didn't have that ability to. But it just seems like there's got to be a way to allow that number to continue to grow while at the same time respecting what those independent processors
Yeah.
want, which is some sort of protection, for their license.
And I think maybe that's the key, right? Is as pharmacies grow, there you can look at an increase proportional on the processor side.
And then also probably guarantee to anyone who gets a cultivation
Cultivation.
license or has a cultivation license,
Yes.
that they can either obtain one or obtain additional as kind of needed. And you could probably find some metric there if you really wanted to, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was the one thing I looked at that. I was like, well, the cap is laudable. I wondered, because I didn't remember exactly what the number was, but you basically said that we're capped as we stand here today.
Yeah. And to your answer, there are 2 current processors with dual licenses. So 4 of the license are just 2 companies.
Do we know if there was any intent to do this from the lawmakers to kind of purposely create naked pharmacies or just independent pharmacies?
I think the intent, from my understanding, is a lot of the independent processors are looking to protect. That's and as processors as a whole, that's really what it came down to. I mean, I don't think.
And I think there was big concern too. It never came to pass, but there was
Yeah.
big concern that at one time they were gonna be able to get a processing license and then do home delivery out of the
Yes.
processing facility. So I think that is part of what
Yeah.
kind of came up
That's
as.
That was our,
remember
we had
why
that same
as well.
vote in the
But
same.
now you can have a cannabis, you can locate a closed door pharmacy within a cannabis, production
Right.
establishment. But I think you still have to have
A
a
pharmacy.
pharmacy license, right? So they kind of close that down. But I think in its current form, we're clearly capped out. And it probably wouldn't hurt, this might be one worth taking some form of action on.
Yeah.
To say, yeah, we support the general idea of the cap. But you've got to think through like what that means for existing businesses. I mean, it seems kind of like there should maybe be a
Trevor,
rubric
will you-
or at least some thought to
I
it.
don't, I mean, I'm sure we can vote on every single line item if we'd like to, but we'll be
Sure.
here all day.
We
Will you just take notes and
That's
say, we vote on the following recommendations? Yeah, that's good. Okay. All right, we'll kind of move forward. So the second thing they're doing is they are increasing the number of pharmacy licenses from 15 to 40. So we'll go through this, but this also requires issuing 3 licenses through an ombudsman. So we'll go into specifics on that. Let's see, so fines, they're redefining the use of fines. As far as unless the violation undermines public health or violates a statutory provision, that's the only time a fine will be issued. And then requires that a fine appeal be addressed at a proceeding with an administrative law judge.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives an arbitrator or mediator, however you want it. So, let's see, cannabis production establishment websites, allows production establishment to have a website that is information about their products and where to purchase them. So, and then it says that we may, so this answers the one we voted on a long time ago to allow process to have a website. It closes the loophole saying you can't advertise on it. So,
But they do target market.
yes, and that's what I'm talking.
So it won't be a general advertising website. It will still, in order to have information regarding products and stuff, I need to be age gated and
Yes,
everything
yeah.
like the pharmacy websites currently.
And patients have to opt in to get information.
Yeah, same idea
Oh,
that you
yeah.
have
Yep.
with us. Okay,
Yep.
Yeah.
that makes sense.
All right, let's see. So as we read through this, so educational events, so allows medical cannabis pharmacies and production establishments to hold educational events for providers. And then just prohibits certain types of educational events. You can't give out gifts, can't give out swag. Other than material. So, and then it specifically defines who can actually present at these educational events.
I did have one suggestion come to mind as far as presenters at educational events, since the Center for Medical Cannabis Research is doing a lot of the educational materials.
Yeah.
Under the current description of the people there, a CMCR representative would have to go through you to have to get approval to speak at one of these events, if invited.
Oh, I
So
think that's a good idea.
It might be worthy to have a representative of CMCR invited, be able to speak.
You got that, Trevor, or Abby?
Just looking for the line.
I'm sorry,
It's line 374.
Thank you.
All right, certificate of analysis website. Now, this did change a little bit in substitute, so I'll probably just speak to the substitute side of it. It's gonna have the Department of Agriculture create a website that will allow processors to upload their certificates of analysis. As long as that certificate of analysis was done by one of the state approved laboratories. Okay, and then obviously the production establishment has to approve their COA being put on the website. So. Pharmacy,
Cost on that.
it hasn't been done yet. I'm sure there will be a cost because someone has to store that data.
Yeah, we were working on the SLAT analysis.
Yeah.
Earlier today, so I'm sure that the county's putting it together.
I mean, obviously, I mean, I know the lab had been working on storing all their COAs and you can search them. I mean, that storage is gonna be there. That's what they have to find out what that cost will be. So. Pharmacy back panel. So this requires that all pharmacies allow the patient to view the back panel of any product and have a picture on the website. This goes back to Nanette's biggest complaint. She sees a product online, she goes to get it, and the terpenes are completely different.
Right.
Yeah.
So annoying.
Okay. Patient product information. So this allows for patient product information inserts. So, so the Department of Health and Human Services will be creating inserts for patients.
And working with
See
to
it.
do so, right?
I don't know if that might change in the sub.
Substitute.
Yes,
Substitute.
yeah.
Right.
Sorry, in the original, it still says in consultation with the Center for Medical Cannabis Research. But it says, and I think it does both.
Right.
Yeah, so. Sorry, jumping around 2 documents here.
Now 3
Yeah,
documents.
3.
I
Well, I'm
apologize.
all over the place. All right, so let's see. So some of the things that the insert will have is listed in there on page this is, I don't know, page 1 even, but line
Which one- which one are
1493.
you in? The Sub or
No,
non-sub?
the non-sub.
Okay.
So it talks about how to use product, common side effects, serious side effects, dosage, contradictions, safe storage. So a lot of information, so. And then requires a pharmacy to provide a patient product information insert, and if they're available, as a physical document, email, text, or QR code. So patients have access to get all these inserts.
If it is digital, right, who's gonna host that? The pharmacy's gonna host those inserts, or is the department gonna host those inserts?
Since you're creating it.
The way we read it with the estimate that we did for the fiscal note and everything, we were thinking it would be on the department's website.
So that's what like the QR code would link to, or the text message would have a link or an email,
Right,
assuming we don't do the hard copy of the insert.
right.
Okay. No,
Now, is this,
that sounds fantastic.
is this defined to be by product category, product subcategory?
The way we estimated in our, when we were doing the fiscal analysis.
Yeah.
Our projection was to do it by product category.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of hard because some of the categories are very, well, I guess under the new, is it the new categories that they're working on? Or is it how it's currently done?
well,
Probably how it's currently done.
there's what, 13 categories right now? I think,
Right?
yeah,
The Salesforce categories.
Yes.
There
Yeah.
Okay,
should,
then that Salesforce, then those are the new ones.
should be 13.
yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean. The way we estimated it, we were assuming it wouldn't be specific to a SKU, you know,
Yeah.
a specific product at a specific pharmacy. We were assuming it would be by product type. So there'll be multiple products, hundreds of products under one product type.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, the only, I think the hard thing you'll get is like concentrates. I know I think there's like 6 different subcategories under that one. So, and then a lot of them do a lot of different things as a concentrate. So.
yeah, so a lot of details to work out.
Yeah, that's on you, not on. So, I think as far as for patient education, that's exactly what things we've been looking at, trying to get out there, so.
Yeah,
It does create a new friend for all of us here at MCPAB. So we will have okay, they put it in the sub, what did it say?
Do you want me to put the sub up on the screen?
Yeah, that'd probably be easier.
I think, I just.
I believe if they wanted,
Or-
so we wanted an individual from the Center for Medical Cannabis Research.
Thanks.
So we will have a 10th board member.
So then the question
But
is,
then
how do
they-
you break a tie?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
won't, no,
Who
they,
breaks the tie?
they won't allow it, so we have to get rid of one or add another, and that's.
So you have to
where we're
add
at.
2.
We'll either have to add in 2, we have to have an odd number, so
Oh, yeah.
I talked to Chris before we left in the drafter.
Oh.
And so,
Well, the sub didn't state that, so.
Yeah, I was
Well,
gonna say,
so,
some don't say.
no, it doesn't, so that's why I had the questions, right? Are we getting rid of Misty?
Whoa.
Yeah.
That was the first
That was,
suggestion,
yeah, that was,
was
and-
that my position be eliminated.
And then you just become the Center for Medical.
Not
Cannabis Research.
necessarily, if
No,
that's what they chose.
but then they would have to re-pick her if they chose
Yeah.
to, is the way it is right now,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah,
so-
what-
So either just go to 11 or
in
stay
step
around.
1,
Yeah.
they
Yes.
removed that position and then add, so there's step
Yes.
9 in the step 1
Okay,
version.
Oh, in the sub 1, it removes
did remove
it.
the researcher and it
Yeah.
adds the
Yeah.
CM, which
okay.
Oh,
is basic examples for
These are new blind
Yeah.
numbers.
Right.
other than
if,
after running.
Going,
if they
Yeah.
pick her.
Yes, yes, it is a possibility that I could be that person. There's also the possibility that because the CMCR represents not just health science researchers, but also agricultural growth researchers and others.
Right,
That
Could be
it
someone else.
Could be someone else.
could be somebody
Right.
else,
Yeah.
absolutely.
but
And it-
yeah.
Yeah, so, yes, so it's a possibility.
Do you want to make a proposal that not happen?
I actually
I like the idea of having, right, the health science
Mhm.
scientist, and
Mhm.
I'm not saying that one of the other ones wouldn't be handy, because I mean, we just went to the symposium, there was a lot of really great professionals there. So, yeah, so the other thought is do we want to keep Misty, let them pick someone else, and then we would then be able to not push in any agendas here, but add a pharmacist to this board.
Yes.
We just scroll down.
So I think it's absolutely critical that
That
the
was just my
CMCR
thoughts.
have representation here.
Sure.
Fortunately, I'm in a position where I'm wearing a couple different hats and I can do that through my medical research representation here. But I might not always be, it might not always be me. My term's coming, you know, we have a 2-year term.
Yeah.
So when I go away after that 2-year term, it could be a
I mean, you're saying
health
like you're
professional
wrong.
researcher that isn't involved with the CMCR.
Numbers is 2 years at the beginning and then.
2 years at the beginning and then 4.
Okay,
So
so
if you get put,
at some point, I'm going to time out.
well, that one's different in that it's appointed
Yes.
by the Center for Medical Cannabis
Yes.
Research. So it's not
And-
appointed by anyone.
Exactly. So, but I think, Des brought up a wonderful point, and it's actually, and a thought that I had as well. It would be a benefit, I think, to have a pharmacist represented on the board. I think they bring some very valuable, insight, for not only patient care, but also for research and
Yeah.
crossing into a lot of different, areas of expertise.
Would that be a general pharmacist or a medical cannabis?
I would
That's
say
up
it would
to-
have to be a PIP, right?
Yes.
Then you're gonna have 2 pharmacy representatives on the board. I mean, I know I'll time out at some point, right? But that was the big
Yeah.
concern, right? Is the reason they turned Matt into the dual representative cultivator and processor. You would now, in theory, have, and I'm not saying you
third
don't, you don't
industry.
do that,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure that you make that the absolute requirement,
Yeah.
like that
Yeah.
any pharmacist could apply, right? Because we've obviously had people that specialize and work in the industry and people that don't, right? You know what I mean? That-
You're kind of the business side, and then pharmacist is like the patient.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying, I think that
It's
people
not
are
how
gonna
it's
say
viewed.
it's stacking the board. That's what.
They won't be viewed
how it's
that
gonna
way.
be
Okay,
viewed.
No, and I think JD's exactly right. That was the conversation at the beginning, and I mean, there's a whole lot of other people that make that decision.
I mean, JD's spot could go to a pharmacist.
Right, JD, it could go to a pharmacist,
Yeah.
but I think there was a concern from at the beginning of this to not make this an industry board. I think,
Right.
so I think the more you add, then I think the more you can kind of supplement with that, right? So you can bring a pharmacist on if you're adding someone else, but again, that's a decision that's way above me, but just to JD's point, that's what was discussed. at the
Yeah.
beginning, so.
And I made that suggestion under the premise that pharmacist as a business and
General.
pharmacist as an individual are 2 separate entities.
Certainly,
So,
certainly. So
Yeah.
it wouldn't necessarily have to be a cannabis pharmacist, although they would be allowed to apply.
in my mind, I had a PNP of some sort, so someone knowledgeable of this particular area of expertise.
Sure, I mean, it lends itself to it.
Yes.
I think it's just then we're
Yeah.
running to the idea of whether you're trying to. back-
Or alternatively, we go with what is currently in statute and I run for the CMCR position or at least not run, but make myself available if that's the way it's voted.
And so so the bill goes into effect, I think, if you look at the effective date, May 1st. So essentially, probably by the time of our July meeting, like it was this past year, we would have that new person selected by the center. I'm guessing,
I think
which
Valerie
honestly,
is
that
in
would probably
attendance.
come in line with when you're
You're up
time
first.
out kind of anyways.
We all
Yeah.
get new people in July.
Right,
If you
yeah.
people are on the
I think
two-year-
I think we have several good options.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if it's those.
Well, we have-
presented. on-
That bridge hasn't come. yet,
Yes,
So I
yeah.
mean, it's in rule. I mean, it's, I mean, the timing should work, but
Okay.
that is a change. So I don't know if anyone has any disagreement. Do you feel that we want to add 2 more seats rather than just replace?
I mean, I do worry about, there's ideas that like if the board is too big, then nothing gets done, right?
Yep.
So I want to be cautious of that, and I feel like we do have a good working board. I just want to make sure that when they are replacing Misty's spot, even in the future, that they replace it with somebody that's, involved in cannabis as a medicine. I know they have a lot of different types of people that they could stick on here, and I don't know if those ones would benefit the board as much.
Well, based off how it's done, it's decisions by the Center for Medical Cannabis Research. So,
Right.
I mean,
Presumably someone has.
Yes.
It's research.
yes.
And as someone who's
Yeah.
involved with the center, I think in good faith,
Yeah.
that would be top of mind.
Yeah. I think it's good. I mean,
That-
one of the things we've talked about
Yes.
in this board is we talked a lot about research, and I think having
Yes.
I mean, obviously you are involved in research.
Right.
But continuing that,
Yes.
right, is important.
Yeah.
So specific to cannabis research at least.
Yeah.
So. Okay. All right, moving on. So let's see, the next item that's on just the non-substitute, it talks about the medical cannabis sales website. So this requires the Department of Health and Human Services to put a request for proposal to establish, maintain, and provide a link to create a website. So this website will have the product's name, inventory from the cannabis processing facility, description, use, dosage, relevant warnings, laboratory test results, and allows the patient to order the item. And it notifies the pharmacy. So this is a third-party company that creates all this. So, but that is kind of where we're at. And then once if it is put an order in the pharmacy, if they will fulfill it, they get to set the price, decide if they'll deliver, set a delivery fee, and then the pharmacy has to request that item from the said processor and have 15 days to receive it. Let's see, and then, all right, that's ombudsman. We'll skip that portion and I'll just move on to the sub. All right, we'll go to the sub, the printout we received. So some of the changes that we already talked about some of it. So the big crux of this rule is creating an ombudsman role within that oversees both the Department of Health and the Department of Agriculture. And so, but this individual reports through the Department of Commerce. And so the ombudsman, some of their defined rules that they're giving them is they want someone who's an expert in medical, assumedly to be an expert in medical cannabis patient law, provide training to various groups about their role and rights and privileges, develop a website with said training, receive and investigate complaints about the Department of Health and the UDAF, review proposed rule changes from both the UDAF and Department of Health, and work with government entities and organizations as needed, and make recommendations to the Department of Health and UDAF. They have set some criteria as far as conflict of interest in that either themselves or an immediate family member have ownership in a medical cannabis pharmacy or production facility, so they can't have any of that. And then they do have and this is where we'll go to the. Is that one then? Yes. So as far as the licensing, so in talking with the sub, so this is page 2 on licensing changes. So the other thing it's doing is it is actually reducing the medical cannabis pharmacy fee in this rule. It's reducing it. Anyone that's in a medically underserved area shall have 50% less the standard amount, and provides that the license renewal is in a county of the 3rd through 6th class. You guys all know what the 3rd through 6th class is. If not, it's 175,000 population or lower in that county. So all those would have a reduced pharmacy license fee. Let's see, and then it changes. So now it changes it that the medical cannabis pharmacy licenses from 15 to 40 with entities selected by the medical cannabis ombudsman. So the ombudsman will be selecting pharmacies. And then defines the process for which medical cannabis ombudsman shall select cannabis pharmacies. And then do you have that up on the board?
I'm trying.
Line 950.
Which one?
Line 950, somewhere around there.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the two things, this is kind of what we talked heavily in the topic with JD, right? So this is in the sub. It says the two things that they shall consider is, well, there's 3 things that's happening is this ombudsman has to, by the end of this year, award 2 new pharmacies. And then by next year, a 3rd. So there will be 3 new pharmacies handed out by the ombudsman.
But those are going to be quasi-independent or independent pharmacies.
Yes.
Those are not part of the general
Correct.
licensing of pharmacies. And these licenses that he's now talking about, where we talked about patient count and things, those are going to be for those non-quasi or independent. Those are going to just be decided solely by the ombudsman, not according to any criteria.
Yep. So so these ones is so the independent pharmacy or the pharmacies he'll be giving out, there's 3 criteria. The first one that applies to all 3 is you can't have a current pharmacy. The second criteria, the two other criteria is applied to the first two specifically. One of them has to be truly independent, so they have no business or ownership relationship with a medical cannabis production establishment. And then the other one of the two can. So that's how that works. And then in addition to those three, so that number 40 includes the three. So we'll be up to 18, and then this ombudsman will essentially be able to award up to 22 additional pharmacies. So, let's see, it does create a subsidy program for Utah patients, and it will provide a $150 voucher to pharmacies for patients who enroll through Medicaid or Medicare. Okay. That fund will be taken from the patient fee, whatever the general fund. And they did increase that from 250,000 to 300,000 in the sub, and then it does roll over each year, I think, right? And if there's not enough money, then they figure it out.
I'd love to see what that
It
does.
stops. Yeah.
Over 65,
Yeah.
if the subsidy helps that.
Yeah.
I bet it would.
I mean, it doesn't specifically say what the program is. It just says he has to create a program and this is what it will look like. Right? I mean, it could be, is it a one and done? Is it monthly? It doesn't really state. So, and then any administrative rules to be provided to the medical cannabis ombudsman. So essentially any rules that are coming, I don't know how the timing will work. We tried to kind of ask this and didn't get clarification, but it will come to MCPAB. And then it still has to go to the ombudsman for final approval. So I don't know if it goes to the ombudsman first and then to us or to us and them. We'll figure out timing. So, and then the other thing with the ombudsman is it does prohibits the agency from providing warning information. So currently, if any of you sat through a license renewal, one of the discussions that goes through prior to renewal is listing how many warnings, letters of concern, violations, and citations that facility had received in the prior 12 months. So it is stating that any violation or any warning that didn't have merit not be even talked about. So our light that's in front of our gate died and we didn't have a light, that would have been a warning. And
You'd have a chance.
that have it.
And in the new,
Yes.
Cody, I wanted to ask you about this because I know Brandon had brought this up. So the idea is if you come and you notice something, right? We then have basically a 30-day period to fix it. And then if you come back and it still exists, is that the point at which it has merit? Or is merit determined by that kind of, complaint, whatever you can submit to the ombudsman?
It's kind of confusing, and we'd like to see some clarity on that. The way that we're taking it right now is that if we did notice something, we could go ahead and write that warning to you. We can use the light, for example, and then you would be able to, within 10 days, take it to the ombudsman to have them review it to see if there's any merit to it. And then the portions that are also confusing is that if it is either determined that it does have merit, or if you don't do it, then we can go with a fine, which we never do fines after a warning. It's just warning. So there's a couple of things that are confusing, but yeah, that's how we've taken it so far, JD, is that the warning would be the start of it. And then you would
have that cure period,
Yeah.
but at the same time, the way the law currently reads is it's part and parcel of that. You would then have a 10-day period within which to file some sort of like an appeal.
Mm-hmm. And then the other aspects that are a little bit confusing is that if there is either after 30 days, if there is nothing, or you don't do the appeal, then we would also reach out and
you can take like further administrative action.
Well, it also says that we're supposed to give like you, and I can't remember what the wording is, but it says that we also like come back and tell you again. It's really weird.
It's the next lines down in there. It
Yeah,
talks about you can't proceed with any administrative penalty until the warning's been like if no complaint's been filed. Right, so we didn't.
So if you don't go to the
ombudsman.
Yep.
And within the time frame.
Yep.
Then if what's the second line says, if the complaint is, if the ombudsman issues a summary opinion, right? Or 60 days from the day the complaint is filed. So essentially it's saying after 60 days, then they can find.
In talking to Representative Provo, she says that Cody's interpretation is accurate.
Yeah, like I said, I will follow the law the best we can on this thing, I guess, if that's a situation, but we would like to see, we're okay with anything with the ombudsman, but we would like to see that we give you a warning if it's necessary. If it's contested, it's contested, and if it, or not, but if it's held up, then it's just, we work through that, whatever the fixes that needs to be done on it. And almost call it good, instead of like the 3 extra steps that it seems to have, but it's kind of strange, I'm trying to look at it.
I mean, I generally like the idea of being able to kind of, get a fix-it ticket, And I understand too, like if it's something that's more significant around public health, obviously that would warrant, different stuff, but you've heard the story that's out there, right? You forgot, this happened to us. We forgot a badge number, a visitor badge number, right? And we're issued a warning that then went against our, against our license. Like, I get the concept of regulation and the concept of compliance, but like, so I don't know, maybe it needs, so explain again, what is Representative Daily Provo saying, how this is gonna work?
I think Cody explained it better than
Okay.
I did.
Yeah, well, I'm now my computer's like not showing me everything I need to do, but yeah, my understanding is that if we do write a warning, if an inspector finds something, comes back, we write a warning, I think those come, I'll sign it, send it to you, and then that starts the time frame for.
The time to appeal and the time to fix it. And
Well, I guess if you're not going to fix it, if you're going to appeal it, in my mind, there's no.
You're not fixing it because
You're not fixing it because you're appealing it, and I guess that's confusing.
so I have to choose between just compliance or challenging.
And I don't want to get.
Well, for me, like the example I gave is the light, right? Obviously.
But I guess, I mean, there's all
fix it.
kinds of things you could say. It's
But
one of those
I'll-
words that my understanding was that if you believe that and you and I had this like on your inventory control, right? Where I came up on a Sunday and looked at what you guys were doing. If you believe that we were wrong in that's what that process would be for the ombudsman.
So if you decide to go to the appeal route, you're then, but at some point, if the ombudsman decides against you, you're gonna be required to fix it and follow the warning that UDAF issued, right?
Well, and then you have to go through the appeals court with the judge.
What's what I'm saying, through an ALJ?
Yeah.
Well,
ALJ, yeah.
Well, currently the ALJ's base would be for anything that has monetary, I guess
Yes.
the new wording says. But so, there's a handful of things that we're looking for, we would like some clarification on, because it just is confusing throughout there, but yeah, so, I mean, that's how, the first portion is how we've taken it, is if you believe that the warning was wrong, then that's why we take it, if not, then it's just getting it in fines, but.
No.
Again, we would all probably like some clarification.
No, for sure.
Representative Provo is on if you want her to.
No.
You're good.
If she wants to weigh in. Representative Pro, if you would like to
You can raise your hand.
raise your hand, we can unmute you if you want to join. You can find her.
No, no,
The record.
we can grab that. I'm looking.
Yeah,
over
if
there.
she wants to unmute, she can. She knows, so, but we'll kind of just continue through. Yeah, I mean, I think if you're looking for further clarification, that's something that we're asking for too, so. Maybe just make a note of that one, whatever that section is. Let's see, okay, so still on ombudsman, so we talked about through that. They do have to provide an annual report, so hopefully it's not like the duplicate again and we get multiple reports from the same thing, so. Moving through, so this is stuff that affects the Department of Health and Human Services. See, again, this is all with the ombudsman. So prohibits the agency from filing a new rule if the ombudsman does not agree with the filing. So they go back and change the language. And then funding allows monies deposited into the Qualified Patient Enterprise Fund to be used to carry out the duties of the ombudsman. So requires at least 10% of the fund transaction fee to be allocated towards the ombudsman. And then it does clarify, there was somewhere else, it says no more than 20% of the what's taken out can be used for administrative costs. Let's see. We already talked through that on the Medical Cannabis Policy Advisory Board. Let's see, sales website, we talked through that. Insert, we've talked about patient portal. Now that's just a fixing house thing. Changes sunset dates. There was one thing we skipped through on here. Don't know if I put it in on this page. One thing that I did, and this is something we've actually, I think we've talked about indirectly several times. Let me see if I can find what page, what number it is, so you can pull it up. Yeah. So it's line 496. So one thing it does discuss is it does allow, so a cannabis cultivation facility may utilize radiation-based methods and equipment for quality assurance or remediation purposes. So one of the things I think, I know we discussed, we never really took a vote on anything as far as use of irradiation. But I think the discussion more was around, what notification of the patient is going to have. Because currently, as it's written, there's no notification. So cultivator may irradiate all their material. And again, the intent of radiation product or based method is to destroy any microbials that are found within cannabis. It doesn't necessarily get rid of the mildew that's growing on it, but it does make it inert so that when it's tested, it comes back as zero.
But Cody, presumably though, if we're gonna require final products that have been irradiated at the processor level to contain some type of warning, I know the statute doesn't say it, but I'm guessing the department's position would be if it's been irradiated at any point, whether the cultivation level or the processing level, that needs to go on the packaging.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, based on our talks, when we brought the processing rule to y'all, I think it's probably something that we probably like.
So just be a rule change for you guys if this.
Yeah, we'd probably like to bring it to, I mean, this doesn't say you to make any necessarily rules on it in that aspect. One thing that we are slightly concerned about is that we don't want this to become a mask for any environmental issues, obviously, type thing. But we wouldn't mind bringing it to the board and obviously possibly the ombudsman if that's something that the board would feel appropriate to have on there. I mean, it is something that we feel, at the beginning for that. So.
I don't remember anything specifically in statute that talks about the processor's ability to do it. So I'm assuming your rulemaking authority for that comes from some other place where you already would have that authority, right?
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily need rulemaking authority.
Yeah, I think it was under the testing, if I remember right, but I could be wrong, it was under the testing and remediation purposes there that allows the testing aspect, so, but,
Yeah. So, yeah, it's, again, it's a widely used process, not just in cannabis, it's used in foods. So, efficacy as far as using cannabis still being tested, and I know I definitely looked into it a lot as we were looking at bringing this to the board and discussing it, but if you already have the rule that you can make on it, and it's gonna be in there. It's probably important, but that's essentially HB 203. Any questions or any other concerns or anything that we kind of want to at least let Representative Daily Provost know or legislators?
Radiation was one of the topics that came up at the Center for Medical Cannabis Research Symposium, in one of the invited speakers topics, its use in the industry. And it is very widespread, from what I gather from the presentation, but I agree that it needs to be indicated at whatever level of radiation occurs that the product has been irradiated. I think that's important to the patient's understanding.
Yeah.
Obviously not my part as not being part of the board here, but just based on what you guys are talking about, 203, would it be something that you all would consider about asking Representative Daily Provo to add something that says to add some language that says that we could put something in the rule to that, or if at least there's some amount of verbiage that says that at least it's passed on to processors who can then
that information and they would have to put on.
Something like that.
Yeah.
That's what's hard is a lot of the biomass is transferred from Nothing is sold from cultivators, so it
Right.
goes right to a processor. So if they don't know, then.
Right.
Okay.
You read that, Trevor,
Have anything else?
that one.
I would invite Valerie from the CMCR to comment if she's still online, regarding the position change. If she has anything to add.
Oh, look at her hand is.
Hi. So Misty and I have been discussing this position and like many of you guys and Rich also, we did not know that this was going to be proposed. So we've all been just kind of coming together to try to work through what this will look like. And talking to Rich, I understand that ideally, keeping the board to a collective of 9 helps move meetings along and, any potential ties in voting. So that's understandable. The only thing that I think might be compromising for us would be to have Misty or to have the medical researcher position not be there or available. But then also having the CMCR position is very useful because Misty has done a great job of bridging that gap between some of the things we might need to cover that might support you guys and kind of helping us build. So part of what might be a good thing to consider, and I also plan to reach out to Representative Daley Provost as a suggestion. If we do plan to remove the medical researcher position and maintain the CMCR position, we would still want Misty to serve in that role. Um, but also if we're planning to keep both, then we would still opt to, for now, maybe have Misty serve in that role. And potentially then, if you guys do remove the medical researcher position along the way, we would have her serve in CMCR. We just understand the value of having somebody who actually understands the development of product along with some of the actual research that she does do in backing some of the things that you guys support. And so we don't foresee that this would be a role that would then kind of become something that would be kind of more clinically led. As far as the CMCR goes, a lot of the decisions as I sit in your meetings lean towards us consistently having someone in the farm and talk space, kind of providing feedback on sufficient product management and contributing there. So I know you guys are kind of going through the same process as we are to vet out what is ideal, but that would be my offering to just throw in for your guys' consideration as you discuss in more depth with Representative Jennifer Daley Provost. Misty, did I miss anything? Is there anything else you'd like for me to kind of
No, I appreciate
elaborate
it.
on?
I'll be happy to serve in any capacity. I value your feedback.
Well, thanks. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. We had a few things which included the labeling brought to us for discussion, but this one kind of was left off of our discussions. So please, if there's anything else I can do to add or provide any other feedback, please let me know.
Thanks.
So in theory, the timing matches up, right? With you timing out in July and this new position coming on board in July. We can keep it at 9 and keep the exact same composition of the board, other than extending your term. Will the CMCR representative, with them being new, will they be a 2-year commitment initially, or will they be will they be 4 years at that point?
Or will that
I
be?
assume they'd still have to be 2, right? So you can stagger appropriately.
No, I think that the original time was this the only time it staggered, and so from now on, everything. should-
Is the way the student work getting.
Everyone would
Well, that's what I'm saying, but like, wouldn't that throw it off though?
No, because
No, because she can
Misty is
start
a
in 4
2-year.
years, eh?
Got it.
Yeah.
So then we
She
should
would be
replace it with,
4.
we'd be replacing with a 4-year commitment.
Yeah, and she would have gone 4.
6 years on the board, you'd be like the king of that.
She'd be like the most senior, she'd be on.
Yeah.
It would be Misty's board.
The Misty.
Sorry, JD, just to that point, if they do phase out the medical researcher role, one thing that Misty and I discussed was enacting research committees, not only to support kind of creating specific feedback loops for some of the things you guys are discussing, but also to support the transition for the CRRB as we move into that. So if there is any value to, you know, kind of working through this all together, one thing that we could consider if that medical researcher position fades out is how we can kind of serve to add specific researchers to our board that can also supplement to have potential conversations or sit in on some of your meetings depending on guided topics.
If I can add to that, the intent there is to build a stronger bridge between our board here and the new Cannabis Research Review Board as it falls under the OTIS of the Center for Medical Cannabis Research, so that we can better address the questions and things that we identify as areas important for research.
All right, thank you, Valerie. Thank you, Misty. I think really, I mean, kind of going through all this, obviously, this will be quite a shift, and puts a lot of the responsibility on this ombudsman. As far as providing them with a lot of the regulatory oversight, as they are the ones deciding whether or not rules should change or not, provides them with the ability to issue additional licenses for pharmacies. And I mean, in that oversight, I think one of the things that I kind of look at, I mean, again, I'm not super familiar with ombudsmans, but the ones I've researched typically are more like citizen. They're kind of neutral parties in that they represent not the state, they don't represent but they more advocate for the citizens and for, in our instance, would be for the patients. And which is one concern is, and again, I don't know how this is addressed, is this separating them from patients too much? Because they're gonna have, I mean, they're now regulating everything else too. And it's kind of back to where we were with UDAP. So I mean, it's just more of a concern. I don't know if it's felt likewise, but it's really all I have.
And for those that don't know, this bill will be heard in committee tomorrow at 2 p.m. By the House Natural Resources Ag and Environment Committee. So, you know, if you want to attend or attend online, you know, to hear the discussion.
I think it's third on the agenda.
Yep.
So
I'm happy to send out the attendance
cool.
information later this evening.
Yeah, room 120 in the Senate building if you.
it's great rooms.
That's where they hold.
Yeah.
So, any other concerns, questions, comments? Okay. Like I said, as this is kind of a live bill, there's not really, I mean, other than, I think we'll try and make some recommendations on things we saw. We'd love to kind of get at least that feedback to Representative Daley Provost and then, if there is time, great. If not, then there's still time, because it hasn't been voted on yet. So, right, anything else anyone else want to bring up? Any other agenda items for next meeting? So next meeting will follow the same schedule. We will be the third Tuesday, not the fourth, which I believe is the 21st. Yes, is it 21st? No, the 18th. Way off on my numbers.
I mean, I certainly think any updated legislation.
Yeah.
I haven't seen yet should definitely be.
Yeah.
Agenda.
Yeah, and just for your notification, there are some additional cannabis bills. Feel free to log into the Utah Legislative website and you can go track bills, anything named cannabis. Currently, there's 3 bills out there that are currently moving through the lengths, so.
And again, if anyone needs help navigating the legislature's website, just reach out to me and I can walk you through on Zoom or Google Meet how to do it. It's pretty quick.
Okay, if there isn't anything else to discuss or anything in there, looks like we're getting 30 minutes back to our day.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Done.
Done.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone.